Have you ever felt like your own mind is your worst enemy? Like even on calm days, something inside you is constantly expecting the worst. I know exactly how that feels. Anxiety has a cruel way of disguising itself as care, responsibility, even caution. But deep down it's a prison, and no one really teaches us how to escape it. Until I found Stoicism, and everything changed, not all at once, but day by day, thought by thought. What you're about to watch isn't just another list of shallow tips. It's a real lived path toward regaining control of your mind, and with it your inner peace. You'll learn about the invisible triggers feeding your anxiety, the unnecessary weight of trying to control everything, and the incredible power you have right now to change how you respond to life, all through the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy, made practical for the modern world. If you're tired of overthinking, of worrying about everything, of living inside a mental storm with no off switch, then this video is for you. Because the answer isn't out there. It's in how you respond to what happens out there. And today, you'll learn how to face it with clarity, calm, and purpose. So leave a like, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel to keep walking this path with me. Your new chapter starts now. Anxiety doesn't storm in like a hurricane. It sneaks in quietly, whispering disguised as worry, always starting with a what if. And the problem is, we believe it. It begins with one little doubt here, another pressure there, and suddenly you're living in constant alert mode. It's as if your mind turns into a battlefield, and no one told you the enemy lives inside. When Stoicism entered my life, I realized the enemy wasn't life, it was my judgment of life. At first, I thought my anxiety meant I was being responsible, attentive, a perfectionist. But I was only trying to control something that didn't even exist yet. Stoic philosophy showed me that anticipating future pain is just a sophisticated form of self-sabotage. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." That's when it clicked. I had to stop feeding those thoughts like feeding an invisible monster. Anxiety had become a routine disguised as preparation. I woke up exhausted from mental battles that hadn't even happened. I started seeing how my mind created tragedies that existed only inside me. Epictetus said, "It's not events that harm us, but our interpretation of them." That completely changed my perspective. The chaos was less about the facts and more about the lens I used to see them. So I began a quiet training, watching my thoughts like someone watching clouds pass by. No clinging, no fighting. I would think, this is just a thought, not reality. That small shift gave me distance, and in that distance, I found power. I stopped being a prisoner of emotion and became an observer. That's where true emotional control begins. And here's a truth that might set you free. Feeling anxiety doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. What separates the wise from the restless isn't the absence of anxiety, but the ability to observe it without being consumed by it. Seneca said even the strong feel fear. The difference is they don't let it lead them. If you've ever felt your mind working against you, comment below, "My mind won't control me anymore." That first step was only the beginning, because once I understood the mind could be trained, I started to wonder what I actually could control and what never belonged to me in the first place. What if I told you that trying to control everything is exactly what's making you more anxious? When I started studying Stoicism, one of the first lessons that hit me hard was learning the difference between what depends on me and what doesn't. I spent hours obsessing over things completely outside my reach, people's opinions, unexpected events, things said in the past, and the more I tried to control, the more anxious I became. That's when Epictetus came into my life like a punch of truth. Some things are up to us and some things are not. That phrase changed everything. I realized that pouring my energy into controlling the uncontrollable was like trying to hold water in my hands. It always slipped through. Real power doesn't come from controlling what happens, but from mastering how I respond to it. That changed the way I faced bad days, bad news, and unexpected criticism. I began training my mind to focus only on what depended on me. My actions, my words, my thoughts, and little by little, anxiety started to lose ground. Imagine someone trying to drive while staring only at the rearview mirror. That was me, trapped in the past, or fearing a future that hadn't arrived. But when I stopped looking outward and started looking inward, I found strength I didn't know I had. From then on, I created a simple habit. Whenever I caught myself trying to control something external, I paused and asked, "Is this really up to me?" If the answer was no, I let it go. Literally. I'd close my eyes, breathe deeply, and release it. It's a practice, of course, but over time you realize that peace begins when you let go of what was never yours to carry. That's the beginning of resilience training. What changed the most was how I dealt with criticism, setbacks, even people's silence. Before, those things shook me. Today, I understand that what others do or don't do says more about them than about me. And that gives me peace. A peace that doesn't come from the outside world, but from mental discipline. Comment below. Today I let go of what's not mine. That might be your first step toward reclaiming your inner peace. And if the mind can start freeing itself from what it can't control, then maybe the next step is learning how to train it to handle chaos in a completely different way. Have you ever noticed how many people treat their body like a temple, but treat their mind like a storage unit for emotional clutter? That used to be me. I chased productivity, results, quick answers, but left my mind messy and neglected. Through Stoicism, I finally understood that the mind needs training, just like a warrior trains the body. Emotional control isn't a gift, it's a habit, a daily workout for the soul, grounded in intention and self-awareness. The first technique I practiced was observing my thoughts without judgment. When an anxious thought would pop up, I'd stop saying, "I'm anxious," and instead think, "There's an anxious thought here." That tiny shift in language created distance. And in that distance, I found power. I was no longer a slave to emotion, I became the observer. And that space between thought and reaction is where strength is forged. Another powerful practice was the mental audit. Every night before bed, I reviewed my day like a Stoic philosopher would. Where did I lose my temper? Where did I stay calm under pressure? Where did I act from ego? Inspired by Marcus Aurelius, I started journaling daily. That mental journaling helped me spot patterns and refine them. It's like sweeping your mental floor every night, keeps the mess from piling up. I also started adding small Stoic rituals to my routine, deep breathing before reacting, writing down morning intentions, pausing to reflect instead of rushing into action. These habits created structure, and structure breeds strength. It wasn't about fighting anxiety, it was about making my mind strong enough not to collapse under it. Stoicism became the mental gym where I built real strength, from the inside out. If your mind feels like a cluttered house, don't try to fix it all at once. Just clean one room at a time, one thought at a time, one habit at a time. And if you're ready to start, comment below, "I will train my mind." That's not just a phrase, it's a silent contract of courage you make with yourself. Because mental discipline is the foundation of lasting transformation. And a disciplined mind only finds true balance when it stops living in the future and anchors itself where life actually happens, right now. You know that habit of living in the what-ifs or the "I'll deal with it later"? That was my norm. I was always living in the future, worried about things that hadn't even happened yet. Anxiety made me believe that if I just prepared enough, I'd suffer less. But the opposite happened. I suffered before, during, and after. Then Stoicism hit me with a powerful reminder. The present isn't a trap between problems, it's a refuge. And to truly live, I had to learn how to stay in it. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That struck me hard. How many nights had I lost fearing things that never came to pass? How many moments had I missed because my body was here, but my mind was already wrestling with a future disaster? To break that cycle, I started asking myself a simple question. What's happening right now? Not what could happen. Not what already happened. Just now. I began paying attention to small things I used to ignore. The taste of food, the sound of birds, the feeling of water on my skin. Life started to look more vivid. It was no longer about controlling the future, but about experiencing the now with full attention. That helped me slow down, take mindful pauses, even speak more calmly. Anxiety, which lives in the future, started to lose its grip every time I chose to anchor myself in the present. It's not easy at first. An anxious mind is loud, it pulls you away constantly, but the present, when practiced consistently, becomes a shelter from the storm. Now, if I catch myself spiraling, I stop, I breathe, I observe, and I tell myself, I'm here. That became my mantra, almost magical. Inner peace doesn't come when everything outside calms down. It comes when you learn to be fully here, regardless of what's happening. If you're constantly chasing a peace that never arrives, maybe you've forgotten that peace lives exactly in the now, and if you want to commit to that, comment below. I choose to live in the present. It may seem simple, but saying that out loud is like installing an internal anchor. It's the beginning of a new way of living, where time stops being your enemy and becomes your ally. And it's only when you truly accept this moment as it is, that you begin to understand that acceptance is not weakness, it's freedom. For a long time, I thought acceptance was weakness. I believed that accepting meant surrendering, giving up, losing the fight. But Stoicism flipped that belief on its head. I learned that acceptance isn't about abandoning the battle, it's about stopping the fight against what's already happened. You know those days when everything goes wrong and you just keep resisting? That was me. But I realized that resistance only created more suffering. The Stoics teach that resisting reality makes you suffer twice, once from the situation itself, and again from your internal revolt. That's when I began asking myself, this happened. Now what's within my control? That simple shift set me free. I stopped being a victim of what I couldn't change and started becoming the author of my response. Stoic philosophy didn't teach me to enjoy problems. It taught me to respond to them with wisdom. I began to realize that many of my wounds weren't caused by the event itself, but by my refusal to accept it. It was like carrying a bag of rocks hoping the road would get lighter. When I finally accepted that some things just are, losses, disappointments, unexpected turns, I felt a lightness I hadn't known before. Acceptance wasn't giving in. It was dropping the weight of fighting a battle I'd already lost. Of course, it didn't happen overnight. It took practice, and I needed daily reminders. Phrases like, accept what is, change what can be, became my quiet prayers. Acceptance became my way of reclaiming mental control. Instead of resisting, I redirected. Instead of complaining, I acted where I still had influence. That's how self-discipline grows, when you stop wasting energy on things you can't change. If you're holding on to anger over something that slipped out of your hands, take a deep breath right now and comment below, I accept and move on. That simple phrase could mark the beginning of your emotional freedom. Because when you accept, you make space. And where there's space, there's clarity. And where there's clarity, there's power. The power to begin again. And once you start letting go of that weight, you'll realize most of it came from the invisible triggers you've been feeding without even noticing. Have you ever stopped to think about what silently feeds your anxiety every single day? I had no idea how many small everyday habits were making me more anxious. Constant notifications, comparing myself on social media, information overload, pressure to always be productive. All of that was invisible fuel for my hyperactive mind. Stoicism helped me see all this through a more attentive lens, and once I did, everything changed. I started practicing what I now call a stimulus fast. I turned off notifications, limited social media, chose more carefully what I consumed. I stopped placing myself in unnecessary battles. The peace didn't come from external silence, but from turning down the internal noise. Every time I avoided a trigger, I was choosing my mental sanity. And that is self-care in its most strategic form, cutting noise to preserve clarity. I also realized that certain environments and conversations were draining me. That's when ancient wisdom hit again. Stoics avoided unnecessary conflict. Inspired by that, I began saying no more often and without guilt. I cut off habits, media, and even relationships that were slowly poisoning me. And doing so wasn't selfish, it was survival. Choosing peace sometimes means making tough edits in your life. Many people believe emotional control is about reacting calmly in the middle of a crisis. But the truth is, real control starts long before that. If you let your mind be constantly bombarded by negativity, drama, and toxic inputs, how can you expect it to remain calm? Stoicism teaches that the mind becomes what it consumes. So ask yourself now, what's been feeding your thoughts lately? Clarity or confusion? I started cleaning up my routine, and you can too. List 3 habits or stimuli that throw you off balance. Then replace them with 3 practices that bring you back to center. It could be reading, walking in silence, journaling, or simply drinking coffee without checking your phone. And if you're ready to commit to this, comment, "I will protect my peace." Because protecting your mind is protecting your future. And when your mind finds that protected space, it starts opening the door to something even deeper, your sense of purpose. There are days when just getting out of bed feels like an impossible mission. And it's not just fatigue, it's emptiness. The feeling of being lost without direction. I've been there, and anxiety used to take over during those moments when everything felt meaningless. That's when Stoicism grabbed me by the collar and reminded me of an ancient truth. When you don't have a strong why, you get lost in the hows. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily to remind himself of his mission, and I decided to do the same. I started writing small reminders. Why am I here? Who do I want to become? How can I serve with what I have? At first it felt silly, but soon it became routine. And that routine brought clarity. Suddenly, even the simplest tasks, washing dishes or answering an email, had a different meaning. Stoic philosophy teaches that everything can be a path to growth, as long as you know where you're going. Purpose doesn't have to be grand or public. Sometimes it's simply taking better care of yourself, being more present with loved ones, becoming a little more patient each day. The important thing is that it moves you, that it inspires you. Without purpose, the mind becomes fertile ground for fear. With purpose, even the hard days carry meaning. You stop drifting and start rowing with intention. There was a day when everything went wrong, work problems, arguments, exhaustion. But when I came home and reread the purpose I had written down, I regained my strength. I remembered why I started, what I was building. That's more than motivation, it's structure. Stoicism doesn't glamorize suffering. It teaches us to use it as raw material. When you have a strong why, even pain becomes fuel. If you're feeling lost or like everything is too heavy, take 2 minutes right now and write, "What makes my eyes light up?" That might be your first step toward rediscovering your path. And if you want to seal that commitment now, comment, "I have a purpose," even if it's not clear yet. The desire to find it is already a sign that your soul is ready to grow, and that's more than enough to begin again. Because when you find that inner compass, you start discovering the quiet power that lives not in your words, but in your silence. At the peak of my anxiety, my mind felt like a room with 1,000 radios playing at once. Every thought screamed a different worry. There was no rest. That's when I discovered something counterintuitive. Silence is a choice. Not outer silence, but inner silence. The Stoics taught me that the space between stimulus and response is where true power lives. And it was in that space that I began to recover my strength. I learned not to react immediately. When someone attacked me with words, instead of striking back, I breathed. When something went wrong, instead of cursing the world, I waited. That space between what happens and how I respond became my shield. Marcus Aurelius said no one can harm you without your permission. And the truth is, most of the time, we hand over that permission, with rushed words and emotional outbursts. Over time, I trained my mind to seek silence before any decision. Sometimes it was just closing my eyes for 5 seconds. Other times, it meant writing down an angry thought and throwing it away. The point was to stop the impulse from deciding for me. Stoic philosophy is like an emergency brake for the soul. It teaches that not everything needs a response. Sometimes, the greatest act of strength is silence. That silence also began silencing the inner voices telling me I wasn't good enough, that things would go wrong, that I wasn't capable. I realized those voices weren't really mine. They were echoes of past fears, old criticisms, limiting beliefs. Quieting those voices felt like wiping the dust off a mirror and finally seeing myself clearly. And in that clarity, I found my identity again. Now, when the world screams, I choose not to scream back. I choose to observe. I choose to breathe. I choose to protect myself from the noise trying to dominate my mind. If your head has been speaking too loudly lately, comment, "My silence is my strength." Because sometimes the best response isn't a clever phrase, it's simply choosing not to be shaken, to remain calm under pressure, to master yourself. And maybe it's exactly in that silence, hard-earned and intentional, that you finally create the space for a new life, with less anxiety and more wisdom. Now tell me, after everything we've covered, what small action can you take today to change your story with anxiety? It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to fix everything at once. It just needs to be a step. One observed thought, one avoided reaction, one conscious breath. Because the truth is, the strength you're looking for is already inside you. Stoicism doesn't create superheroes. It shapes people who stay grounded when everything around them shakes. So what are you going to feed from now on? The chaos outside or the peace within? Will you keep trying to control the uncontrollable? Or will you finally start mastering what truly matters, your thoughts, your attitude, your presence? That decision changes everything, not just in your mind, but in your entire life. And it starts now, with you quietly reclaiming the driver's seat of your awareness. Tell me in the comments, which teaching from this video hit you the hardest? Which practice are you going to apply today? I'll be reading and replying to as many comments as I can. And if this content helped you in any way, if it spoke to something inside you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Here we don't offer surface-level content. We offer transformation from the inside out. And this is just the beginning of your journey.